Hey, welcome to Heart. I'm Scott Salath, and let me tell you a little bit about our title for today's talk. Conjectures of a Slow Learner, 7.5 lessons I got to relearn in my 40s. And that desk, for those of you that have been to Loose Leaf Hollow, you recognize that's the desk in the Merton room, where I have stayed many, many times and done a lot of writing at that desk. It's not quite Merton's desk, but it might as well be for me. So one of his last books was Conjectures of a Guilty Bystander, I believe. So the Conjectures is a play on that. Um, and then slow learner is intentional because I like to think of myself as a fast learner, but not in all these things, not in the 7.5 lessons that I'm going to talk about today. 7.5 lessons actually comes from a recent neuroscience book by Lisa, Mary Lisa Barrett, I think, called 7.5 Lessons About the Brain. So, anyway, we're not going to go deep into the brain today, but maybe go deep a little bit into my heart, actually. So, right brain and heart and soul. Um, so, a little left brain, enough left brain to keep us on track, right? Okay. So, the other kind of piece for today is we're going to talk a lot about journaling and panning and poetry and lighthouses. For those of you that have been with Joe for a long time, you might remember him talking about lighthouses in his integral journal from many years ago. So I'm going to share lots of my own poems today, a few from others, and many of these have become lighthouses for me. So, all right. I Just a little bit about me, and then we'll jump into the 7.5 lessons. Um, this is not going to be the story of my life, but it will be a little bit of the story of my married life in the last 13 years. But originally, I'm from New Orleans, and I came up to Louisville in 1997 for grad school, and did a doctorate in clinical psychology, and I've been practicing for about 25 years now. Met Megan about 15, 16 years ago. We fell in love quickly and then married in 13. So that's where today's talk picks up. I'm the oldest of three boys in my family of origin, white middle class Catholic family. Um, Went to a Jesuit high school and college and got lots of good um, social justice informed Catholicism from the Jesuits, but also a lot of Catholic guilt too. So that just goes with the deal, as you know. You can't really subtract that out, I don't think. All right, and I met Joe at a journaling retreat in Milford, a Jesuit retreat house in Cincinnati in 2005 or four, something like that. Right around the time he was publishing Green Bamboo. So Joe and I go back about 20 years now. So and Joe has been one of my major spiritual mentors in my life, and certainly for the last 20 years. So much of what I've learned has been through him and through the authors and mystics and poets um, that he has introduced us to. So I'm very grateful. So the first couple of lessons are from my first few years of marriage before the pandemic. So we'll go pre-pandemic, post-pandemic here today. Pre-pandemic, got married in 13, and the first lesson is about after the honeymoon, the kitty litter. Uh, so um, um, Megan is a big lover of cats and dogs and horses and really all living things. And she is in practice. I am more in theory. I grew up with no pets at all, unless you count two younger brothers. It's debatable. Um, but so I got used to kind of living in a much sort of different situation for me. I'll get to that in a little bit. But the first lesson is that marriage is a lot harder than it looks. At least it was for me as a psychologist who's a workaholic and perfectionist in recovery. Um, in case you're thinking about the one on the Enneagram, yes, I see my fellow ones here laughing. and chuckling, maybe one adjacent folks. So, yeah, one in recovery here for sure. So, yeah, it's easy for me to think I know a lot about relationships, and I'm a couples therapist. That's kind of what I do for specialty. But teaching it and living it are two different things, as you know. Um, so, my wife Megan's a wonderful person, and of course, she's very different from me. She's an introverted six. And when we married and moved in, I moved in with two cats, a dog, and a part-time father-in-law. And I knew about the cats and the dog and her horse, but the father-in-law part was, a bonus. I guess it was maybe in the fine print somewhere. I don't know. It happened along the way, so that was difficult. It was just a fair amount of growing pains um, for me. So you know, ideals were shattered about what it would be like. So the honeymoon kind of ended pretty quickly for us, and then I got those of you who might know me won't be surprised by this. I got very very busy. So as ones tend to do when the heat goes up, ones double down. So I got very, very busy. I volunteered myself to teach a brand new course in graduate students, for graduate students in psychopharmacology, which I knew just enough to be dangerous about, but not enough to teach grad students quite yet. So I had to really self-study and go to a lot of trainings. And I bought some gigantic, psychiatry textbook and pretty much taught it to myself and then taught it to the students and just trying to stay a step or two ahead of them. So, that was, an ambitious project, let's say, kind of classic one project. I now realize that it was probably some sort of unconscious deal of trying to prove to myself that I could do real science since I tried to flunk high school chemistry. So, 30 years later, I'm trying to prove something to myself, I suppose. So, but meantime, if that was not enough of a side job, second job, in addition to my practice, I decided to also go for a really rigorous certification in couples therapy called EFT, emotionally focused therapy, which is probably the top evidence-based couples therapy. So it was really good. It was really worth doing. But I was doing it at the same time that I was learning and teaching this psychopharm course. So I was just super busy, super bookish, and super unavailable to Megan, as well as to friends and family. Um, I, uh, I, I didn't realize that what Brene Brown calls hustling for your worth was what I was doing, but boy, was I hustling. I was double timing it. So, yeah, the second lesson's called lifelong learning gone too far. So I think that's what I sort of learned. I thought, well, this is good. I'm not sitting on my laurels and like, well, I have my doctorate and I'm teaching and whatnot. I need to do more and learn more. Fair enough, but I decided to do it all at once. So it was more than busy. It was kind of crazy, or even a little psychotic. And I got permission from Megan to use those words. Those words are usually banned in our house. I'm married to a psychiatric social worker, so we don't say crazy or psychotic, but she agreed it was appropriate terms for this period in our life. So, but after I learned some of those lessons, I kind of turned a lot of guilt and shame on myself too, that they were big mistakes or somewhat mistakes or something. And I've really had to work on realizing that that was um, some of it was more of a side trip than a mistake or a waste of time. And I suspect that might be familiar to some of you. By the way, I meant to say at the beginning, most of this is going to be autobiographical because I'm trying not to teach you anything, but just for me to keep learning these lessons. It'd be a lot easier for me to just like try to teach you something, but that's what I do all the time. So I'm trying to refrain from that. Um, So I hope you might relate to one or two of these lessons, and if you do, that would be fantastic. Um, but back to side trip, um, yeah, just realizing that some of the things that don't make sense at the time might not be a huge mistake or waste, but a side trip that can only be seen in retrospect as having some value, often double sided and maybe fierce grace, as Joe says. So, so yeah, that was a difficult time. Of course, as you might imagine, all that set us up to have some more challenges in our marriage and to become more isolated and irritable with each other. Um, so I wrote here, tired and grumpy, I pursued and criticized her when we were not connecting very well. Predictably, she withdrew, retreating more and more into her books and pets, and me into mine. So even 5, 6 years in, as some of you might relate to, it's not that long to have problems in the marriage. So they weren't major, but they were big enough for us to cause problems. Um, and I think like most people, like most couples that I see, we were stuck in. I thought she was about 90% to blame, and she thought I was about 90% to blame. So it's a lovely place to be, let me tell you. And by the way, like if anything's universal, that is universal. Every single couple I see comes in like that. Um, so without me blabbering on too much longer about that, I want to read you a beautiful quote from John Wellwood and then a poem of mine that came from it. Wellwood has several great books, but one of his first major ones is Journey of the Heart. And so here's a little quote from him about when the heart breaks open. It says, every relationship contains many moments when we are unable to get what we want or resolve some difference with our partner. Even in the best of relationships, two individuals will never fit together perfectly. When we feel the pain of this, it breaks the heart wide open. And when the heart breaks open, and out of the protective shell we have built around it, we shed our ideal images of how a relationship should be, and we may feel naked. Yet in this nakedness, we taste the essential nature of our existence. The truth is, we never have had ultimate control over what happens to us in this life. Therefore, we feel naked and vulnerable to be in direct contact with reality. But this puts us in touch with ourselves and with our partner in a much deeper way. So, yeah, that's a big one. That's a deep one. I'm still learning that. Here's a poem that came from that time. It's called Expectations or Reality. Maybe it could be called Expectations and Reality. Am I willing to look at my expectations, to really look deeply into their many and long origins, from lonely adolescence to searching 20s and early 30s, to falling in love with a beautiful woman, hoping beyond hope she would finally be my sex pot? And now, am I willing to see her for who she actually is, her real strengths, preferences, and limitations, and right size my expectations? Not sure my left brain knows how to do these, how to set these not too high, not too low. Perhaps we'll have to imagine and create them. This is the next chapter together. Okay. The next three lessons are from the pandemic era, which I kind of entitled Dark Nights of the Pandemic, next 2 or 3 years. It's funny to me, sometimes people refer to the pandemic as just 2020, but I don't know about for you guys, but for me, it was about 3 years, not one. And it felt like 33. The lesson three is rediscovering my pearl of great price, which is Megan. Um, we identified we had problems and we started couples therapy, which was a little humbling for me as a couples therapist, but it was just what we needed. It was really good. I had to think about applying these things to ourselves. I had to try not to be the expert. And most of all, I had to refrain from so much criticism and feedback. Um, and that began a real long, slow diet of reducing all that, the habits and the scar tissue from that, which really took years. And anybody that tells you it takes less, I don't know. Um, and of course, more listening, less talking, and more affectionate touch and flirting, and less focus on sex. Um, so just really a whole different receptive mode. And of course, Megan had her part to play as well. Um, Funny this morning, we had gotten into some disagreements a little bit last night, and then this morning I'm trying to say some funny things to kind of perk her up, and none of my jokes were landing. But about 30 minutes later, I'm slowly vacuuming, and I have my coffee cup in one hand, and she's like, "Now that's really cute." I'm like, "Okay, best thing I said this morning, clearly," which was nothing at all. So yeah. So all right, two poems that came from this time. One from me and one from Yeats. So I had a little minor surgery in early 2023 just to get a little benign cyst removed. It was the first time I was ever under. So it was actually kind of a powerful experience for me being under and then coming out of it. So when I came out, it was kind of a mystical experience for me. So I wrote this poem on March 16th of 23. It's called Beneath the Jackson Juice. Um, sure, my GABA was allosterically modulated rather ideally by the magical Jackson juice, but what was revealed beneath my mountain of neuroses was a breakthrough of gratitude as they rolled me out of the hospital in a wheelchair into our little familiar little Honda SUV. Giant tears of gratitude flowed from my heart of hearts for Megan and for the kind and competent staff at the hospital and for my wife, full of blessings and regrets and potential. Never so happy to come back home with my sweetheart and our dog Lizzie, helping me into our home and our bed, resting in the arms of love. So, tiny surgery, big effect. And the one from Yeats called Vacillation. The longer poems. I think this is just the fourth movement. My 50th year had come and gone. I sat, a solitary man, in a crowded London shop, an open book, an empty cup on the marble tabletop. While on the shop and street I gazed, my body all of a sudden blazed. In 20 minutes, more or less, it seemed, so great my happiness that I was blessed and could bless. 20 minutes, more or less, it seemed, so great my happiness that I was blessed and could bless. That one's always stuck with me and had extra meaning when I turned 50 a couple years ago. Lesson 4: identifying grieving and healing from parentification. So much could be said about this. Um, but I guess maybe the most important thing is I realized I needed to get back into individual therapy. So by this time, Megan and I had concluded our couples therapy, but I jumped back into individual therapy and did a ton of work um, grieving the loss of, what I thought my family was, which I thought I had grieved before. So there was tons of anger and sadness and confusion, and then more anger, sadness, confusion, then rage, despair, grief. They were my constant companions. Um, so, and meanwhile, also coming to terms with Megan and I's decision not to have children. for a variety of reasons. And yeah, just feeling a lot of deep loneliness and isolation from that. Um, this little book by Alice Miller was very helpful to me. The Drama of the Gifted Child by Alice Miller. I don't know if any of you know it. It's a tough little book. She doesn't pull any punches about getting involved in your parents' relationship and being a peacemaker and all that sort of thing in your family. So, if any of that's relevant for you, you might consider that book. It's a fierce grace kind of a book. Um, then lesson five was when things fall apart again. As a result of a lot of my work, I wrote letters to family members. And the good news was my parents received my letters quite well and receptively, and it led to some really good, healthy, healing conversations. And the bad news is my two younger brothers received them very poorly. And one of them went into real stonewalling period and still won't talk to me. And the other one, um, a lot of anger and a lot of rage and back and forth. And um, yeah, so just a giant mess. So I suddenly found that I went from having two brothers to no brothers. My brothers were really offline, inaccessible for me, and the guilt and the shame was tremendous, and still is. Um, this is where Pema comes in. As many of you know, this Pema's famous book, "When Things Fall Apart," and there's so many quotes, but I'll give you maybe one of the most challenging ones in the book. Chaos should be regarded as extremely good news. Ha! Well, that makes maybe a little sense to my left brain, but not anything else. And I'd like to, consider it BS. And but yeah, I shook up the family system by writing these letters, and most of all by resigning from being the peacemaker. And so I had to realize that even though I thought I had resigned, I had not completely resigned. But when I completely resigned, oh boy, did that piss some people off. So I imagine some people can relate to this. So I learned to refrain from fixing, coaching, peacemaking in my family, and really had to learn how to zero these out, not just put them on a diet, zero them out, and allow the fierce grace of winter to clear things out and start fresh. This has been so hard, so hard. Pema helped, Tonglen helped, and a few poems helped. Wrote a lot of poems during this time. Here's one called Refraining. Sitting in stillness, waiting in silence, refraining from fixing, and trusting in the seasonality of all things and all persons. Here's another one, Spaciousness. Emptiness is not nothingness, but it seems like it because each is quiet and dark, and any change is painfully slow and imperceptible. Spaciousness is vast and deep, like the great ocean, perpetually pregnant with possibilities, myriad choices, and infinite hope, and constantly evolving, often unexpectedly. From tiny ripples to giant tsunamis, from tweaks to transformations within us, we are learning to tolerate and accept it all. Boy, that's hard. Still hard. And then a third one, hope is the third way. Hope is not the expectation of things wished for as a child prays to Santa. nor the prediction of results of an election or a sports ball game, and it is definitely not cynicism of what we dare to not imagine as even possible. Perhaps hope is a third way, a middle path between prediction and cynicism, between wishes and fears, a land where possibilities abound, yet strangely hidden in plain sight within a dark and frozen forest of our hearts, waiting patiently yet receptively for things to gently thaw and slowly warm, for something entirely unpredictable and new to arise. Hope without expectations allows all possibilities to be possible. So, yeah, that one still rings true. And the last couple lessons are about springing into growth, post traumatic growth, if you will. Lesson 6 is allowing my spiritual community to evolve, um, trying not to throw out the baby with the bathwater with Catholicism as I sort of ended my church going days, as I really outgrew that. Um, but don't need to throw it all out. And much to my chagrin, became sort of a Christmas and Easter Catholic. I always used to look down on those folks, and now I am one of those folks. It's lovely. So, and I'm not sure the guilt will ever end for that. I think that one may be lifelong, maybe multiple lifetimes. Um, Recommitting to centering prayer, where Cynthia Bourgeois, in her beautiful little first book, she's written several, Centering Prayer and Inner Awakening, um, says intention is everything. It's 90% of the ball game. So I didn't really know what she meant at first, but I think that's a really wise observation. And I may share my intentions here in a couple of minutes. Uh, uh, Try to get really clear. What are my intentions for sitting, and what are my intentions for living? During this period, kind of in the last few years, I've recommitted to sitting, journaling, and panning. Um, I've gone through 20 notebooks that I've written over the last 20 years. Thank you, Joe. Joe did encourage me, like, you don't have to pan through every line, every page. You could just toss them out. As a one, that's a little hard. So, but and there was some good gems in there. But anyway, so we're down to about, oh, I see 4 notebooks over there, 4 or 5. So we've 80% downsized. This is good. Um, and the other thing I've done in the last few years is print my poems. I had a bunch of poems here and there and everywhere, as I imagine maybe some of you do, and I actually printed them and realized, like, well, I can write a little bit, and these are helpful for me. And I have no method, and I have no goal with them. They're 100% for me. Um, and I think part of what's challenging today is sharing them. I've never really shared them before. Um, so here's 2 more signs. Signs of encouragement. Perhaps these are signs from beyond to keep doing the work, turning, deepening, within and beneath, not up, up and away, the ego's way. Perhaps the true gold floats in plain sight in the deepest river that flows through the giant mountain, unseen, unspoken, and unpublished. A sacred realm, miles below the surface noise, the hottest core of the earth, the source of all energy and love. What if this river runs through each of us? The second to last one, another one on grieving and refraining. As our family Titanic finally sunk beneath the surface, I allowed it and grieved. My anger, my confusion, my sorrow, and most importantly, my hope for preventing it. Instead, I refrained from fixing anything and did a ton of therapy and filled dozens of notebooks of journaling and devoted 2 retreats to this too. And so, as 2026 begins, I'm starting to feel the last year or two was more than just painful grieving. It may have also been constructive. Dad offered apologies. Mom sent a letter. One of my brothers slowly began to re engage with me a little bit. Perhaps all that was worth waiting and refraining for. Um, one or two more, but the other thing I wanted to kind of just say here on like lesson 7 was creating space for fun and play. It's not all grief and pain. Psychologists like to emphasize this, right? But I'm kind of recommitting to play, fun, my physical health, my body. I relate to what Joe says about kind of not realizing about having a body and being very left brain centric. Um, so I'm trying to de-shame the lack of children through volunteering, trying to relearn how to play golf um, and enjoy the natural beauty that's everywhere. Um, to really being focused on the difference between being driven and drawn, which is such a gem for me in discerning like what I need to spend my time on. Um, so, 2 last poems, one by Hafez and then one of my own. My favorite poem by Hafez is To Build a Swing. Many of you have heard this. You carry all the ingredients to turn your life into a nightmare. Don't mix them. You have all the genius to build a swing in your backyard for God. Now that sounds like a hell of a lot more fun. So let's start laughing, drawing blueprints, gathering our talented friends. And I will help you with my divine lyre and drum. Hafez will sing 1,000 words you can take into your hands, like golden saws, silver hammers, polished teakwood, and strong silk rope. You carry all the ingredients to turn your existence into joy. Mix them, mix them. And then sunbathing. And with this one, or sunbathing is why we meditate. Simply practicing, sitting and practicing, simply soaking and allowing the warm sun to slowly defrost all my frozen joints so that I can play once again in one big field. All right, super briefly, 3 half lessons. Um, do I really believe all this? Yes, I do. I just can't live it consistently, right? Not even 50% of the time. So, and I suspect that's true of most of us. So, I encourage you to try to make that distinction when it feels like all BS. Um, Second thing is grieving and growing up is a lifelong spiral staircase that's way longer and slower and harder and more winding than anyone but Joe tells us. Um, and then the last little encouragement, find your path, your methods, your community, use them daily and trust them that they'll bear fruit eventually. But maybe when you least expect it or a lot longer. Okay. Final little thing I want to share are my intentions, which are on this little um, old fashioned spiral bound note cards. So I've gone through several iterations of these, but this is helpful for me. And then we'll transition into some sitting. Remembering my intentions for full bodied breathing, for open minded curiosity, and soft hearted compassion. Abiding my limitations and discomforts, losses and gains, with gratitude. Trusting my experience, all of them, thus simply allowing my divine light to shine. So I often read this, not every day, but once or twice a week, and especially when I'm feeling very distracted and muddy and what the hell am I doing? Why am I doing it? So this is a good touchstone and home base for me, remembering, abiding, trusting, and allowing. Okay, I think that is plenty enough. So I want to invite you to transition a little bit into meditation mode.